names then. Excellent. I can put it all on your shoulders. Now, if people actually signed up to speak, because I remember Patricia had sent a note saying 9 people had signed up to attend. Is that the same thing?
Not necessarily the same thing. The only person who's asked for an opportunity is
Taylor.
yes.
Okay. We'll play that by ear, see how many questions we get and how long it goes.
Yeah.
But I think you'd seen that Steve said he's okay with it, so if we can squeeze in.
It's topical.
Got it. And I thought I would give like a 3-minute brief summary of what we heard today on the IBX and then a more full report at the main meeting. Wow, everybody's early birds. I'm actually going to dump off for 1 second and I'll be back.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Alvin.
Hi, Sean.
Hello, Detective Newsy.
Hi, Valencia. Hi, Alvin. Hi, Glenn. Hey, Dwayne. Andrew.
Hello,
Happy
Andrew.
birthday there.
Tamara. Hi, everybody.
Happy birthday there, Scotty. Happy birthday, Mr. Nuzzy.
Hi, everyone.
I hope you saved a slice of cake for the rest of us.
No, you know that's not happening.
When was your birthday?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, but we celebrated it today.
Oh, mine was Friday.
Oh, happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Florencia.
Thank y'all.
Everybody's getting another year better.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hi, Sean. I didn't hear one for you.
A happy birthday?
Well,
I
hello.
said it.
I said hello.
Hello, happy birthday. Nice to see you again.
Thank
You
you.
look younger. You got a haircut.
I didn't know. Keeping it nice.
So instead of your birthday being today, Star Wars Day, it's tomorrow, Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo, even better. A little bit better.
I had 2 meetings with Andy today, 2 meetings with Scott today.
Banner Day.
Banner Day. Doesn't get any better than this.
It's a great day. Mark on your calendar and celebrate it every year.
Andy,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
It's been a while since we've had to communicate. I think now it's not intergov stuff anymore. So
I know, it's great, right? Yeah, I'm about to get back to my cubicle in at 2 Broadway, so I'll be in video shortly. That's what happens, Dwayne, when you wear many, many hats.
I know it was weird wearing all those hats. You know. No, I'm back to just one. Happily back to one.
Okay, I'm back. So am I correct in seeing that none of our presenters is here yet?
Yeah, I think Andy Inglesby is here, but I think he's singing backup tonight, right, Andy?
I'm doing 1 slide out of 15.
Warren Berry looks to be one of the names I recognize.
Yeah, Warren's with me. Yep, and he's doing the bulk of the transit. Yep.
Okay, so I'll defer to him. So Warren, after I make introductions, you can start into the presentation.
We're waiting for the Department of Transportation
Oh,
as well.
they have not. Okay.
Is
So
and
Kyle-
Diana Soriano, is that Diana Soriano? Is that the Diana I'm seeing?
Yeah, Sarah Feller from DOT is going to be leading the presentation, and Warren is going to be joining her.
Okay, I just have Sarah down for one of the three, but I'll just sort of start her off then after introductions.
Good evening. This is Diana Soriano from Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office. Hello.
Thanks for joining.
Glad to be here.
Is there
And Diana,
anything?
we're waiting for Kyle Gorman on the open streets.
Yep, I spoke to him earlier, so he's definitely going to join.
And Sarah Feller will be with us. And
Okay.
Neil Gagliardi as well. correct?
Probably already.
Okay.
That is correct.
Introductions pending their arrival.
Okay.
So I guess technically we're at 6:30ish. So welcome to the CB14 Transportation Committee May meeting. I'm Barden Prezant, co-chair of the committee with Steve Cohen, who is battling COVID, sadly, and is off dealing with pharmacy and doctor issues. I think it may be the only committee meeting I've not seen him at, so I don't think we should think any less of him for it and wish him a quick recuperation. I'd like to introduce the other members of the committee who are here, just so that guests can see who we are. So Sean, if you could just read off a quick roll call, that'd be great.
We are, so far, there are other committee members will be joining us, I'm sure, but we are joined by Alvin Burke and Glenn Woolen from the committee, as well as Florencia Changa-Jada, Nina Sabgir from the board, and Dwayne Joseph from the board. We've got two public committee members, Liz Denise and John Pouliot, here. And if I miss somebody, unmute and shout yourself out.
Just so you know, I would normally, Detective Scott Nuzzi, I believe, is here, joining us from NYPD. Any other electeds or anyone else care?
We do have Joel Jasuvra from Councilmember Rita
Rita
Joseph's
Joseph's.
office, and Sabrina DeJuste from Councilmember Farah Lewis's office.
Thank you both for joining us. Is there anything you want to say in advance, or mainly just want to listen first and maybe make comments later?
Yes, for me.
Go ahead, Joel. Yes, as in you want to say something now, or just wait and watch and make a comment later, possibly?
Make comment later.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Then I believe we have been joined by Kyle Gorman, who is the Senior Program Manager for the Public Space Unit, New York City Department of Transportation, and he will be reporting on Department of Transportation's Open Streets program. So I'll turn it over to you, Kyle.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm Kyle. I'm from the city's Department of Transportation. I work in the Public Space Unit at DOT, and I have the unique opportunity of managing our Open Streets program here citywide. Tonight, I'm going to go through a very quick presentation about the program and some of the requirements of the program and how you could potentially get involved with participating. Happy to take any questions after, and please just know that the Open Streets application is still open. We're accepting them on applications on a rolling basis throughout the rest of 2022. So there's still plenty of time to apply and lots of resources on the table to make your Open Street a success. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Screen mode. All right, so let's jump into it. 2022 Open Streets, Season 3 of the program, building on a lot of great work that we've been doing for many years, as I'm sure a lot of folks know, related to transportation infrastructure and public space. But through the pandemic, there's really been a huge paradigm shift in the sort of view of streets as public space and reimagining the ways that our streetscape can be used. So at the core of the program, we've been prioritizing bikes and pedestrians and public transit users as well on open streets as they're navigating the city, especially through the context of social distancing. That was how the program first launched. But, you know, really the through line at everything that we've been doing is really making sure that we're adding to a lot of the broad goals that we've set to add this type of infrastructure and enhance the quality of life in New York City. But as the pandemic has gone on, we've really layered on different types of evolution and support and activation to the open streets. First is through economic recovery, as I'm sure a lot of folks have now seen, and businesses, especially restaurants and bars, have been using the public right of way or the street and sidewalk for outdoor dining, open storefronts, open culture, and lots of other different types of ways. You know, we did this in an effort to help these really struggling businesses in a really dark period of the city's history. And, you know, the ability to operate outdoors really has been and continues to be a lifeline for these businesses as they navigate economic challenges and other types of issues that we've all really been existing in. But what has been really interesting about the program is that this can also be a tool for economic development. A lot of businesses talk about how open streets days are some of the best days that they see in terms of profit and foot traffic. We've seen a lot of new businesses actually even open on open streets corridors across the city through some economic studies that we've done. So it goes to show that at the end of the day, there are amazing public space and transportation and traffic safety gains that we can make with open streets, but those can also be complemented by supporting our small businesses and the entire economy of New York City. What's also been amazing about open streets is all of the sort of community building that has existed within the program. Informal groups of neighbors have now come together to create different types of public and open space for all. So there's been a really amazing just community building experience that has been consistent with the evolution of this program. People who are otherwise seeing each other throughout their day-to-day lives maybe weren't connected before the pandemic, but have come together to really work towards something positive and community-oriented through open streets. We've even seen our fair share of weddings and divorces, I'll add, on open streets. So you can really see all the sort of different types of relationships and flourishing on New York City streets. We've also layered on different types of activations and programming and creative uses of the street. Really amazing activation we've been working on with is the Bendelsted Family Circus, bringing the circus to our open streets, much loved by all ages and backgrounds, and supporting all different types of arts and cultural organizations across the city. Open streets and the other public spaces that DOT manage are really amazing venues for these different types of creative programming and activation opportunities. Something new to a lot of folks that, as I've been giving this presentation that I've been telling, is that Play Streets, the former Play Streets program, which has existed in New York City for actually over 100 years, is now actually housed within DOT's Open Streets program. So we're working with all types of educational institutions, public, private, and charter schools, to give them more space for safer pickup and drop-off operations, outdoor recreation opportunities, as well as outdoor learning. So anyone in the past that you know, whether it's a family or friend or your own kids that go to a school, know that DOT is willing to work with any school across the city to do or at least pursue an open street to see if it's feasible, because the Play Streets program, like I said, is now within open streets. So another exciting layer that we've added to the program throughout the pandemic. So in terms of what we're looking at this year, sort of with the nuance of the participation and details and the sort of everything you need to know. First and foremost, equity is at the program's core. The city recently released the New York Streets Plan, which lays out a whole set of goals and different types of outcomes for the DOT to achieve related to just making our streets safer and more equitable for all. And that's definitely consistent with how we're evolving the Open Streets program. Just actually about a little over a week ago now, the mayor announced a $900 million investment and a lot of different things for DOT. And something that is part of that is a lot of money to help us maintain and manage open streets. So more so than ever before, and I've been doing this work for 7 years, so we have more resources to really make our public spaces thrive and really equip our community partners with the tools that they need to succeed. So there's different levels of support that we can offer, but just know that there's really a lot of resources on the table. One other goal that we're working towards is really integrating open streets into the sort of wider operations of New York City and having it sort of just a regular part of the streetscape that people know about. It is predictable, there's significant outreach and all the different things that it takes to make our amazing city run. So that's a huge goal of ours, is, like I said, just integrating that into the wider city operations and working with our partners and communities, the community board, elected officials on long-term change that, like I said, are set through goals that we have via the street plan. And we also recognize that every community and every corridor across the city is unique in its own issues, opportunities, challenges, ideas, backgrounds, experiences. So we want a scalable set of solutions that can respond to those unique needs. What's great about DOT is that we have an amazing toolkit of items, and Open Streets is one of them, to really evolve our streetscape to make more space for bikes, pedestrians, public transit users, accessibility infrastructure, while balancing the needs that our streetscape sees with loading, deliveries, the need for people to drive and park and all the things. So there's a lot of things that are on the table that come with Open Streets, which is what makes it the most nimble and really great tool that we have at DOT. So I've touched on this some already, so I'll just briefly go through the last items and that will conclude the presentation and then we can go to questions. But know that there's a lot of funding on the table. All partners this year are actually receiving $20,000 in funding. I'll say that again. Every partner who participates is receiving $20,000 in funding, regardless of the number of days, the number of blocks, or for however long you want to do it. We're really here to equip you with a significant amount of funding to make the Open Street a success. There's a lot of other grant opportunities that we have available through other sister agencies as well as other nonprofits. We have a whole list of different programming providers that you can use this funding to activate your Open Streets and really take it to the next level. There's opportunities for short-term concessions. People have been using this to do green markets and other types of artisan markets, sort of like pop-up type style markets, as well as cultural concessions. We did a really amazing concession opportunity with a meatpacking bid just last year, which was a performance style concession, which was a really creative activation of the street. And then on the sort of base level, as always, I'm here, and so is all of my wonderful colleagues at the DOT to support you on developing operations plans, navigating outreach, working with community boards, elected officials, and all the sort of other key stakeholders and partners that come with creating public space. And then there's also all the behind the scenes work that I really focus on with working with our city agencies across the city, working with internal DOT agencies, NYPD, fire department. So there's a lot of different things that we've worked on to really evolve this program and make it a success. So the last couple things are just about the 3 different types of open streets. There's the limited local access, which is a bike and pedestrian priority street that's limited to just local traffic, no through traffic. But if you are driving on the block, you must adhere to a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit, as well as be cautious of pedestrians and cyclists, but parking and those local access trips are still preserved. Then there's the full closure type of open street, which is a street that's temporarily closed to vehicles and has allowed for a lot of different types of vibrant activities to take place as well. There's lots of great sort of restaurant-oriented style open streets that you might have visited over the last couple of months. And then, like I mentioned at the end, there's now a specific type of open street just for schools, and that's called the full closure for schools. public, private, charter schools, all types of schools are eligible to apply for the open/play streets in the city's DOT Open Streets program. Here's a great photo of one of our more popular open streets that's evolving to really the next evolution of how we want to evolve this program with permanently designed plazas and shared streets and other bike and pedestrian oriented infrastructure. This is a limited local access open street. Here's another full closure type of open street in Bedside, Brooklyn on Tompkins Ave, one of our success stories really of 2021, and really excited to see it come back in 2022. Just launched the last 2 weekends ago on Earth Day, having a great Mother's Day celebration this weekend that I know a lot of folks are looking forward to. And here's a photo of Brooklyn for schools. This is with the Brooklyn School in Brooklyn. In one in particular, sort of being used for the recreation areas, but sometimes, like I said, people use it for pick up and drop off, for learning, anything to really support schools in their educational pursuits. So the last item that I'll touch on is what it is required to apply. There's an application online that I'll drop in the chat once I finish the presentation that you complete with just relevant contact information, location details, days and times, and just some other pertinent details. But there's also a couple documents that you need to create. The first is the site plan. If you've ever done a SAPO permit, it's very similar to that, just showing a general layout of where things go with the 15-foot emergency lane. Then there's a management, staffing, and operations plan. These barriers can be managed and monitored. All things are going to be cleared at the end of the day and reopened, and just a general operations plan, as well as implement emergency weather plan, outreach, how you're going to work with all the different types of stakeholders that sort of might be impacted by the open street, and making sure that you're using inclusive strategies to do this outreach. The last two items are optional. If you are a new partner, you do need to submit letters of support. It can come, at least 3, I should say, that can come from any really entity, community stakeholder, elected officials, community-based organizations, the community board itself, any sort of stakeholder within the community at large can submit these letters of support. And then the final document is a budget proposal and some fiscal forms. These are required if you are going to be requesting the $20,000 in funding from the cities. You do need to be a nonprofit to receive the funding. If you are not a nonprofit, you can work with a fiscal sponsor that you might have some sort of relationship with. If you don't have a fiscal sponsor, we have a relationship with other different types of nonprofits that could potentially work with you as a fiscal sponsor. Those things would need to be completed, but we can definitely get into more details if you have any questions. So that's really the conclusion of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll just plug again the application that is going to be open until really the end of the year. We're accepting applications on a rolling basis. Just know that it takes about 60 to 90 days for us to review everything, so we have to work with all of our city agency partners. We also do formally give now community boards and elected officials 30 days to weigh in on any applications. So there's a little bit of time between when you apply and when your open street might be able to start. But that is really open streets in a nutshell. I really appreciate everyone getting here on tonight and listening to the presentation. And now I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Concise and informative, very much appreciated. I see Councilmember Lewis has joined us. Would you care to make a comment at this point?
No, just joining to get more information. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other representatives of elected officials that have joined us who'd care to make a comment?
I think they've been acknowledged.
Okay, then Sean, I believe you have your hand up, and any other board members who have questions, please raise your hand.
And I'm helping you keep an eye on that too, Barden. Thank you. First of all, I was remiss in not noticing the presence of our chair, Joanne Brown. So that's an oops on my part. And committee member Maria Rivan Hazelwood has also joined us. And Michelle Brunson from the board is also here. I have a question for you, Kyle, because The community board, I don't know if this is something that you're newly implementing, that the community board is going to have an opportunity to weigh in on open street applications, but the only way I have found out about open streets in this district are one from a council member, one from the applying organization, it was a renewal, and one from the precinct sharing information with me. So if we could have a better heads up, because without knowing about the open streets, I've had conflicts with film crews on streets that are supposed to be open streets, and with and a religious container that was approved, but that also ended up being on an open street. So in order to navigate or really avoid the conflicts, I would appreciate notification at the application stage and certainly at the approval stage so that we can help manage this. These are not in the SAPO system. So you mentioned SAPO, but better interagency coordination, I think, would really help this program to work a bit more smoothly. And I don't typically pick these bones in public, but I just want to, it's becoming a little feeling urgent as summer approaches. And then just to voice a continued frustration that some of our open streets are very close to Newkirk Plaza, which DOT, it's already a pedestrian plaza, but DOT has not adopted the plaza into the plaza program, yet closes streets adjacent to the plaza. So a plug for that and just rationalizing that and notification, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I just want to say I really do appreciate a lot of the sort of ideas and comments that you really have given us to improve the program throughout the pandemic, and totally agree with you on a lot of the ideas that you just shared about, you know, integrating it into the SAPO system and sort of wider city coordination. Like I said in the presentation, a big goal of ours is operationalizing the open street per se. So point well taken, definitely agree with you on that front. This year, it's been a little bit of a slow rollout, but now moving forward with all open streets applications from this time forward is there will be a 30-day notification period, or comment period, I should say, for elected officials, community boards, as well as NYPD, but we did let them even before it too. So that is something that is going to be rolling out moving forward with open streets.
Thanks a lot. Liz Denise has her hand up.
Go ahead, Liz.
Hi, I was just wondering, you know, you had talked about equity, and you know, this is CB14 has like very little access to parks and to public open spaces compared to other community boards. And I was just wondering how many, if you knew how many applications were applied for open streets in our CB, and then I think only one got approved, and it's a new open street going forward, but there's not currently an open streets map. So I might just be like misreading the table really quickly. So apologies for that.
No, that is my bad. The map is forthcoming as well, so stay tuned. Right now, there was just one open street on Newkirk Avenue that was within this community board. We do, like I mentioned in the presentation, have more resources than ever before. In fact, you know, we have a program now just for open streets that has, you know, a multi-million-dollar figure to help community partners that don't have the capacity to manage these open streets. The DOT, through a partnership with the Horticultural Society of New York, can actually step in and help manage the barrier operations, add horticultural elements, sanitation support, things like that. And then we can still work with those community partners that are really engaged with these types of issues and ideas and opportunities. You know, maybe they can focus on programming, helping with advocacy, and sort of, you know, adding that level of support to make sure that the open street is a success overall. So that's really our goals for equity moving forward.
If I may, I just have like a brief follow-up to that, which is, you know, I think I think the application, you know, it requires kind of having an existing like strong stake where, even if you get the money and the funding, like you still need to have like a staff, like kind of a community partner that has a lot of staff in it. And, it looked to me like earlier in the pandemic when open streets were popping up, like a lot of the community that has maintained some of the most wonderfully programmed open streets in the city kind of like organically came around because like the space was allocated and made available. And I don't know if those same streets would have been able to have such vibrant programming now if they had to go through such a burdensome process compared to just when streets were kind of granted initially. And, I remember in our district, Parkside was kind of an open street, but it didn't have, it still had a lot of car traffic on it. So that made it very hard to get, to get programming to kind of sustain that. But I guess just kind of from an equity lens, like what is DOT doing? How can this program continue to be made easier to kind of get the ball rolling so that, people can pick up on the momentum and, community can form around it a little easier?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, we have one of the sort of easiest to complete public space programs within New York City, if not the entire country. So, we definitely want to balance the need for not creating too many hurdles and too many burdens, but we also do need to have some sort of process to sort of work towards some of the things that Sean was just talking about, as well as what I mentioned about operationalizing these open streets. We do need to have some sort of process behind it, but at the end of the day, also through the open streets legislation, DOT can also self-select and identify and then manage open streets. So were there places across the city, and this is something that we want to sort of work towards now that we just all got a lot of this funding, there's places where people who have been mentioning there are no open streets or there isn't types of open space or public space for a variety of different reasons. DOT can then step in and sort of help manage those spaces because, whereas we want to straddle the line of organic sort of coming together of community members, that also doesn't work in all communities and all neighborhoods across the city because, social, economic, and political capital by no means is equitably distributed across the city. So in those communities where they were able to sort of self-organize and take on the management of open street, that's not necessarily a model that's going to work everywhere. So we also want to balance that with having a full set of tools and scalable solutions, like I mentioned in the deck, to respond to the unique needs of all the different types of communities in the city.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I just want to throw in one quick one, which is the new requirement for 3 letters of support. Was there a particular issue that encouraged that implementation, or is that just the way the program has evolved?
So that is a requirement that is consistent with the legislation that was passed by the City Council. The program actually now was, as I didn't mention this before, but was made permanent through Local Law 55 of 2021, and that did require us to collect 3 letters of support.
That is a perfect answer. Had anybody signed up to speak on this issue? No? Okay, not seeing any other hands, then I think I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a report on the Church Avenue bus lane from Sarah Feller. Is she here?
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, I guess you're the project manager. This is a very long title. Project Manager, Transit Development Group, DOT. Oh, I see. Then Warren Berry was also joining. Is he going to do half the presentation as well?
Yes, I have this. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment. And Warren and Andy, you're here, right? Andy, I see you. Warren, I see you. Perfect.
Yep.
Great. Right. Take it away.
Great. Let me go ahead and share. All right. You all can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, everybody. We really, really appreciate it. My name is Sarah Feller. I am a project manager on DOT's bus priority team. I have a cold right now, so if I cough, please excuse me. I'm joined by Warren Berry and Andy Inglesby from MTA. This was a joint project of ours. You might recall that on Church Avenue, we put in a bus lane late in 2019 after presenting to CB14, CB12, and some other community stakeholders. This is a progress report letting you know how that bus lane has performed and where we're at now. So why did we do Church Avenue? So Church Avenue was identified as a priority project in 2019 due first and foremost to very, very slow bus speeds. Church Avenue had bus speeds of about 4.25 miles an hour during the peak periods of the day, which is that's about a New York walking speed. And we know that especially on a busy route like this, this being one of the busiest routes in Brooklyn, with more than 45,000 people a day using the bus routes that use Church Avenue, on a route so busy, service should work better. It should be reasonably fast. It should be on time. You should know about how long it's going to take you to get from A to B. We need to get folks going where they need to go. And so we knew we had to do better, and that's why we pursued a project here. After the community outreach process and the developing of this project, we implemented in October 2019, number one, some curbside bus lanes from East 7th Street to Marlborough Road, and then as well as updated curb regulations from East 7th to Marlborough, and then further east as well, all the way to Flatbush. And I'll show you that in a map in just a moment. This is a quick rundown of the bus routes that are served. Of course, the most important route is the B35. This goes all the way down Church Avenue. And then out in Borough Park, Sunset Park, it goes into 39th Street. So it's a really, really big, long crosstown route. It connects about a dozen different subway routes. And it's one of the busiest and ultimately most important bus routes in Brooklyn, in addition to 3 other bus routes that use certain parts of Church Avenue. This is a quick aerial map showing where we put in, each treatment. So outlined in blue here in the left-hand side of the screen from East 7th Street to Marlborough Road. This is where we added the curbside bus lanes, and we also updated some of the curb regulations to reduce double parking and to ensure that parking spaces were available on the side streets as well when the bus lanes were in effect. And then further east, from Marlborough Road to Flatbush, we updated the curb regulations only. And so for that area in yellow, we did not pursue a curbside bus lane. And that was largely because it's so busy there. There's so much curb demand. We studied the curb demand. We studied how many vehicles are using the curb per day or per hour by block. And we realized that if we put in a curbside bus lane here, does the bus need it? Yes, but it wouldn't have worked. There was just too much demand to use that curb for deliveries, for shoppers, for residents, etc. So as a result, we put in, all we did in the yellow section is we updated the curb regulations, again, to reduce double parking and to try to make more spaces available for folks when they needed them. This photograph in the bottom here shows what the bus lane looks like today on Church Avenue. This is at Church and Argyle Road. This is the classic tried and true curbside bus lane. We've been putting these in New York City for more than 15 years, and they've generally been quite effective. This bus lane is active 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. That means, of course, that parking is permitted overnight as well as on Sundays. And you all might recall that before this project was put in, the Department of Sanitation was sweeping the street overnight 3 nights a week, so you couldn't park there overnight 3 nights a week. We were able to work with the Department of Sanitation, so that way now they sweep the streets while the bus lanes are in effect and overnight parking is restored. Some of the other benefits of this project are, of course, buses and all the people in them can now bypass traffic congestion. They can, especially on these short blocks where there is a traffic light every 200 feet, instead of getting caught behind every other traffic light, the bus can go through, several lights without hitting a red, which really helps. Additionally, since the bus is already up against the curb as it travels down the street, the bus can reach when the bus approaches a bus stop, if it needs to deploy the wheelchair ramp for someone who's using a wheelchair or a walker, it's already parallel to the curb, which means it can deploy the wheelchair ramp quickly and safely, and that's definitely an accessibility improvement for folks who use wheelchairs or walkers. And finally, this kind of bus lane can be used by any vehicle at any time to make a right turn, to access a driveway, to quickly pick somebody up or drop somebody off. And also emergency vehicles can use it at all times, and school buses can use it at all times. So it's not just buses and bus passengers who benefit. It really is, a wider variety of folks. I'll quickly walk you through what this looks like block by block now with these maps. These few blocks are in CB12, but I'm just going to show it to you in geographic order from west to east. So starting from Ocean Parkway, and you can see here these blue rectangles are where the bus lanes were added. at the curbside lane. One thing that we were aware of with this project that we talked about a lot with CB14 and in other meetings was that obviously when the bus lane is in effect, you can't just park there. And so if you need to visit a business or visit a residence during the bus lane hours, we want to make sure that you can still do that. And so what we did is we added, we added new we added new metered spaces on the side streets right around the corner from church. Excuse me, just 1 second. Sorry. So we added these spaces on the side street right around the corner from church. The new metered spaces are the green rectangles. And we also added loading zones for businesses to get their deliveries. And those are in orange. And you can see the same style of map here. This is the CB14 section from Coney Island Avenue to Marlborough Road, where the bus lanes currently end. And you can see the same thing is that on every commercial block, we did add metered spaces on the side streets. Now, those metered spaces and those loading zones, for the most part, those were previously alternate side parking. And the reason why we converted the alternate side parking to metered, again, is that if it's metered, you can't just park there and leave your car all week, which means that the spaces are more likely to be available when somebody shows up to access a business or to make a shorter trip. And that was really what we needed to accommodate, is make sure that people can still support businesses and still have access. Moving on now to the area further east, closer to the Q train from East 16th Street to Flatbush Avenue. So you can see that we also added a couple of loading zones between 16th and 17th. We added a few new metered spaces on East 18th Street. That was just an opportunity that we saw because this is MTA property right around the corner from Church Avenue. We could meter that space. Excuse me. Additionally, what we also did is, again, to help prevent double parking and try to keep traffic flowing better for the buses and for everyone else who's trying to move on Church Avenue, we created 15-minute unmetered parking spaces. And so you can see that those are the light blue rectangles you see here between East 18th Street, East 19th Street / St. Paul's Place, Ocean Avenue, and 21st Street. And these are just for short sections of the block. It's about 3 spaces per block or per side of the block. And the purpose of this is, oftentimes on the busiest streets, even if you meter parking, even if you have a 1 hour or a 2 hour meter, it's still being used up. That space can still be parked up all the time, especially if folks are feeding the meter. And therefore, when someone needs to, pull over to go to a store, they block traffic, they double park, or they block a bus stop, or they block a fire hydrant. And so to prevent that from happening, we put in these 15-minute spaces. They're unmetered. You don't even have to pay the meter. You just pull over, do what you need to do, complete your trip, get back in your car, and move along for the next person to use that space. And the purpose of that is to increase the parking turnover. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But for now, let's talk about the results. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Warren from the MTA, who can speak to the bus speeds here.
Hey, thanks for having me out here. Really nice to see everyone. Yes, so this is the results section. And so here we have the bus lane section from East 7th Street to Marlborough Road. And we have noticed some really nice increases here. The eastbound direction, all times a day, we had a bus speed increase, 13% in the morning rush, 13% midday, and 6% in the evening rush. And then in the westbound, we really noticed some great increases there with 24% increase in the AM rush, 13% increase midday, and 8% in the PM rush. And I just want to point out these bus speeds are from October 2019, before the lanes were implemented, and October 2021. And we like to use October because we find that's a really representative month for high ridership and, just the time of the year when we have the highest ridership and the most people are in the city. We also like to use May as another month for the springtime. So we'll be hoping to get those results soon. We had some really great results from 2020, but we obviously attribute that to lower traffic volume and everything that was going on with the COVID pandemic. So we did not include 2020 as representative of the bus lane impact. But yeah, we've been really happy with the results so far in the bus lane section from East 7th to Marlborough. And we can take a look here at the next slide, which is the next section where we did the new curb regulations. And, you know, no major surprises here. It's approaching the really congested area at Flatbush. We continue to see speed decreases here on the bus, almost all time periods, except for that outlier westbound AM rush. And we're not exactly sure why we've seen such a speed increase there. I think part of that just has to do with the buses heading westbound, getting through all the congestion, heading into Flatbush Avenue, and then heading west. But you know, all of the sections with the new updated curb regulations, yeah, we continue to see decreased speeds, and you know, that's a trend that we're seeing, you know, all over the B35 line, particularly on the Church Avenue section. Next slide. So yeah, just a summary here from the MTA perspective. The 7th Street to Marlborough Road with the bus lanes, we've seen faster and more reliable service than 2019, even taking out 2020 due to the pandemic. And you know, we'll hope to look to May 2022 this month for some new results so we can report back to you soon. Marlborough to Flatbush, where the just did the curb regulations, we are still, you know, on the B35 seeing slower speed and heavy delays and congestion. I'm sure everyone in the community is very familiar with the traffic issues in that area. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, and then my colleague Andy is going to get everyone an update on the Brooklyn bus redesign to finish up. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Warren. So now I'll speak to the 15-minute unmetered parking zones that we put in east of East 16th Street. So we did a study of four of the 6 block faces where we put in the 15-minute zones. Here's an example of them in this photograph here. So this is Church Avenue and East 18th Street, just across the street from the Q train station. And what you can see is, you know, closer to this intersection, you know, we chose the busiest parts of the block that had the most double parking, and we put in those 15-minute unmetered zones. So overall, we saw, and there was a lot of text on this slide, but number one, on average, the double parking decreased. On 2 blocks, we almost completely eliminated double parking, which is just a really impressive thing, just given how narrow this street is and how much it gums things up when a vehicle is double parked, especially a truck. The other 2 blocks actually had slight increases. We're not sure why that is. We're still studying that, but on average, we saw a sharp reduction in double parking. Additionally, on all 4 of those blocks, illegal parking, that is parking in a bus stop, which also blocks the wheelchair ramp, or parking in a hydrant zone, which has its own safety concerns. All of that decreased as well on all 4 blocks. Overall, the 15-minute zones had a higher parking turnover at all of those locations. Overall, most of the motorists did respect that time limit. And as a result, you know, we expanded this pilot to Bell Boulevard in Queens, and they're studying the results of that going forward. Next, I think my colleague Andy from MTA can speak to the MTA Brooklyn Bus Network Redesign, which is a forthcoming project.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Yeah, so just we just wanted to remind everybody that the Brooklyn Bus Network redesign is certainly still out there. As people remember, before the pandemic, we were really going full speed ahead. We had just released the existing conditions report in the early part of 2020. So we just wanted to remind everybody that, you know, we are going to be revisiting Brooklyn Bus Network redesign very shortly. We don't have a definitive date as far as when the community outreach will start up again, but we will let everybody know. But, you know, in line with this presentation from DOT and Transit, we just wanted to remind everybody that, you know, as part of the bus network redesign, we'll certainly be prioritizing bus priority proposals like this in partnership with the DOT, and you know, hope to have a lot more information for you guys in the very near future. Specific dates to be determined, but we just wanted to keep everybody abreast of what's happening with the network redesign, and we thought it would work out well with this presentation from DOT. So I'll turn back to.
Great. One more thing I'll add to that. Sorry, Andy.
Absolutely.
one more thing I'll add to that is that, so as part of the bus network redesign, I think the MTA's plan is to identify the most critical streets to invest in bus priority, which is what we've done in other boroughs where we've done this. And one thing we do want to note is that there's no plans at this time, but being realistic, Church Avenue is a likely candidate for that. And again, that's because the buses are really slow, the service is very unreliable, and it's getting slower over time. And so, you know, again, there's no plans at this time, but we did want to kind of convey that, you know, the 2019 project that we did made some improvements, but there's still, you know, a need to improve bus service and make Church Avenue work better. And that's our presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and let us know any questions you have.
Thanks so much. I think I see my co-chair has joined us, hopefully feeling better. So Steve, fire away.
Thanks, Barden. Thanks so much for the presentation. I appreciate the well, we all appreciate the update. Remembering when you came here, you know, I guess 2 years ago or so, and 3 years ago, and telling us about the proposal. I guess my experience with Church Avenue, I'm personally there on Saturdays, and I guess from my standpoint, what I witness is that buses aren't really using the lanes, the bus lanes between, at least between Coney Island Avenue and Marlborough. They're basically traffic was moving very well on Saturdays, from what I can see in both directions. So I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to scaling back the bus lanes on Saturdays, maybe allowing for parking, if that's been studied or considered. Just because, at least from a layman's perspective, you know, just being on Church Avenue on Saturdays, the bus lane just doesn't seem to be, you know, speeding anything up because the traffic's moving well. Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Steve. So we can look into the Saturday bus speed data in particular, and we can get back to you on that. Do you, MTA folks, do you have any thoughts on this, particularly around buses not using the bus lanes and reasons why that might be, or if that's an issue, or how, you know, that sort of thing?
Not right now, but I'd be happy to take a look into that and come back and present some Saturday bus times as well and speeds.
Great, thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
I want to throw in a quick question. Have you monitored the car speeds over these periods, both eastbound and westbound on Church through those stretches?
We haven't actively done that. I mean, it's been that we do have the ability to do that. So if you'd like us to do that, we can study that and get back to you. We do have access to that data. I mean, on the whole, you know, and again, this is a pretty standard bus lane design that we've implemented around the city. And on the whole, it does benefit traffic flow overall for reasons I talked about in the presentation. But we can look into that and get back to you on that as well.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I mean, I have no sense of scale as to the percentage increases that we've had in the bus travel time. You know, was it 6 to 13% and 8 to 24%? Is that in line with the improvements you've had in other areas?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it obviously it varies. Every street is different, but yeah, the improvements we're seeing, that's in line with what we generally see. And one thing I also want to note is that that's an average, but not only does it make the buses faster on average, but it also helps to make that travel time more reliable. Whereas if a bus is in mixed traffic, you know, maybe one bus gets lucky, it doesn't hit a lot of traffic, doesn't hit a lot of red lights, but then the bus behind it catches more traffic, catches more red lights, and therefore one bus is moving faster than the other, and that leads to what we call bus bunching, where you have 2 or 3 buses arrive at one time, and then a long gap until the next one comes.
That's a famous concept, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that's a thing that these bus lanes also help to reduce, but we can certainly look into the traffic speeds for you.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Thanks. I think Nina Sebier, I believe you were next with your hand up.
Hang on, I'm getting there. Thank you very much. It's always good to hear updates. So I just have a question regarding that, the 15-minute no meter zones. Is there any enforcement on that, or how, practically speaking, does that actually work?
Sure, that's a great question. Sorry, I'm looking down because I'm taking notes on all of your comments here. So the way that this works is, that was one of the big concerns we have, is how is this going to be enforced? Sorry, I had an image of this somewhere. Anyway, how is this going to be enforced? And because it's not metered, a traffic enforcement officer can't just, enforce it the same way that they enforce metered parking. But we felt that that having an unmetered was important, because what you see all the time in the city is people will double park just to not pay the meter, and then they're blocking traffic and nobody wins. So so that was really part of the point of this, was to make it easier to park legally than to park illegally. And ultimately, enforcement is up to the NYPD. There are different means through which they can enforce it. But the bottom line, the bottom line is that folks overall have been following these rules. And one of the big benefits is that there is an active enforcement presence on Church Avenue, with officers enforcing the meters and other traffic infractions on that street. So I think when someone pulls over to use this 15-minute space, they see cops on the corridor, and they know that that if they break the rules, they're liable to get ticketed.
Thank you.
John Polly, I believe you're next. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Thank you guys so much for your presentation. I'm a pretty frequent B35 rider, and I was so excited when the lanes went in. And then I gotta say, a little bummed because I get stuck when they stop pretty consistently. And I was wondering, I know there's a bus network redesign, which is an entirely different set of issues, but I was wondering I appreciated so much how fast it made my trip from Sunset Park going this way, at least. If there's any kind of feelings or plans for extending it down that busiest section, because I wait with 75 people sometimes in the morning for a rush hour bus, and it's people start going in dollar cabs and stuff and taking Ubers. It gets pretty hairy. So I'm wondering if you guys have thought about extending it and what the feeling is about that. Thanks.
Sure. So I spoke to this a little bit at the end of the presentation, but so to be clear, we have no plans at this time. What we're doing is, my team's work for the past few years and the next few years going forward is we're coordinating with the MTA. So the MTA is doing their bus network redesign. And as part of the redesign, and I know my colleague Andy mentioned this, but they'll be reviewing and working with us as well, MTA and DOT, reviewing the most important streets to invest in bus priority. Bus priority could mean bus lanes, traffic signal timing improvements, transit signal priority, which is our smart signals that turn red lights green when the bus approaches, or make a green light stay green longer when the bus approaches. So, ultimately, when the MTA does these redesign studies, they'll be identifying corridors, and then in turn, DOT, my agency, will start working with the community to develop proposals. So I think, being realistic, Church Avenue is a likely candidate because it's so busy and so slow. But we have no plans at this time. Definitely that is a future conversation, a medium to long-term kind of conversation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Dwayne, I believe you're next. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Sarah, for this presentation tonight from you and your team. I was wondering, it's actually just a request. Would you mind just going back to your slide about the speed result performances? Yes, especially the one. I just wanted to, from my own notes, just capture the increases and the difference in increases and decreases. So for your, and just for the second part, what is it? Marlborough to Flatbush. And you said there was no, you guys, or I guess Warren's a person responsible for this. You guys don't have any key KPIs around why there's a decrease at this point?
Do you want to take that, Warren?
Yeah, in this particular section, nothing specific. I think I would just say that it's following a general trend that we're seeing with slower bus speeds throughout Brooklyn. And as you saw in that previous slide, or the slide there at the end, I mean, we've seen about a 10% decrease throughout the bus network in the last 5 years. So I think this section is just, sort of following general trends of slower bus speeds throughout the borough, which we're, working to address through the network redesign process that's upcoming.
Okay. I also just want, if I could just follow up really quickly, I just wanted to make the point that in the community conversations around where the bus lanes should be placed, I do remember being part of a meeting where the community did request for the bus lanes to be between Flatbush and Marlborough. So to John's point earlier, any conversations around expansion, I think would be it'd be good to have.
Great. Yeah, I mean, in MTA perspective, we'd love that. So we look forward to that.
If you have no other questions, then Glenn, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there's been any looking into how the removal of parking for these bus lanes has impacted the businesses on the Church Avenue corridor. Has anyone looked into that to see if that's changed? Thank you.
Sure, great question. I mean, we have not done any specific. I don't know quite how we would study that. That's not something that we've studied directly. I don't know community board if you've heard things from business owners, but I will say overall, if I can get back to these maps, again, when we were first planning this out in 2019, we heard a number of times about concern about the loss of those part-time parking spaces, which is why we wanted to make sure that spaces were still available right around the corner at all times. But yeah, to answer your question, we have not directly studied that. I'm not quite sure how we would, to be totally honest with you.
If I could jump in, Barden, just because I have.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Thank you. We have heard from those merchants, and they continue to be, a lot of them continue to be fairly bitter about the loss of opportunity for the restaurants, for instance, that can't have open streets for restaurants, and the childcare place with their drop-offs. So I would just encourage direct communication with the Church Avenue bid, which is run by Lauren Collins. I think you all know her, in order to get a feel for that, to inform future and expansions.
Great, thank you very much.
Then I believe next is Liz. Go ahead.
Hi. So, I live right by Church Avenue. And, usually when I don't really take this bus much anymore because it's still very slow. And most of the time I try to take it to connect to the subway. And so, unfortunately, with a 10-minute headway and 10-minute service and it getting clumped kind of in the spots without the bus lane, I take it a lot less than I would really like to. But one thing I will notice as I walk the places that I would take this bus, because it's it's more consistent but slower, and I'm lucky to be able-bodied enough to do that, is that the bus often, when it doesn't take the bus lane, it's because it can see somewhere a few blocks ahead that there's a car in the bus lane. And something else I've observed is that there seems, there are these lovely like loading zones and metered spaces. And, a lot of the times I just see cars still pull up in front of a business really quickly. And it's just very confusing to me because, these blocks are really short. It's not too far to walk and to have a really safe, easy spot to like do drop off or pick off, unload any sort of like business deliveries or so on and so forth. But I guess just like, from that perspective, I guess kind of like what can we do to like make, these spaces that have been allocated more effective so that the bus can always use it? Because, when it is at peak rush hour, sometimes, there is more traffic and the bus is slower. But then also, I just wanted to echo some other comments here too, that people have made that, the bus, like I mentioned, it really clumps on the other side where the bus lane stops. So I would really encourage there to be thought into expansion because, the main change that I've really observed is that with the bus lane, when someone does something, they're not double parking anymore. They're just illegally kind of parking in the bus lane. And if they're doing a quick drop off, that's great. That's fine, as you mentioned. But sometimes they're, there for a while, and, because there's just not too many buses, the current camera system on the buses don't catch it. So like, what can be done to kind of encourage using that space better? And also like make sure that when it, to try to hopefully get that same kind of approach to, help speed up the other parts that do cause the bus to clump and make it less reliable and make that 10-minute headway like an even higher expected wait.
For sure. Thanks so much for all these comments. I'll say first off that in terms of, yeah, we certainly see this here and around the city, is like when you have a curbside bus lane, per state law, any vehicle can pull over into it to pick somebody up or drop somebody off. And that's state law for any bus lane in the city. I think folks often argue that it's important from an accessibility perspective if you're picking up or dropping off a senior citizen, for example. We hear you loud and clear. We try to create options again around the corner. The rules are the rules when it comes to this, and that's, we're kind of doing what we can with what we have. Were there any other parts of your comment you'd like me to respond to in particular?
I guess like one thing I'm kind of curious about is, I do think that it works kind of okay right now because people can just keep going in the other lane. Like it keeps the other lane kind of clear most parts of the day. But, if traffic keeps getting worse because more people are driving since the pandemic and so on, like, is there potentially the option to thinking about looking into using like the on-street cameras to help make sure the bus lane is clear instead of just the bus cameras? And just, I guess, like I said, I guess, I know that the bus redesign is happening, but just, again, just wanted to mention that like expanding this bus lane would make it a much more effective bus lane than it currently is.
For sure. So we do have some on-street cameras that are currently in effect on this corridor. So they're not on every block. We have a limited number that we can deploy citywide, and I believe that's a legislative limit. If that limit changes legislatively, I think it might have recently, actually, I forget, but when we're able to deploy more citywide, we'll certainly look into potentially putting more on this corridor and on all the corridors that need them. Now, the on-bus cameras, that is an MTA program. MTA folks, can you speak to that at all? I don't know if we have those cameras active on this route or if we have plans to.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm not sure. I'll have to check with our folks here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I think Nina, you still have your hand up. Is that from the last question, or do you have another one?
This is just another, I guess, a response to the question that was raised regarding the businesses, and that's just that I think that given that these changes were implemented right about the same time that COVID struck, and there've just been so many other changes that may be a little bit difficult to parse out what specifically is what. Regarding the daycare center and the issue of drop-offs, I don't know whether it's possible for DOT to have like a brief period of time where there's maybe a spot or two that's like loading, unloading during the most the busiest times of drop-off and pickup for children.
Sure. I hear you loud and clear on that. And I think there was some outreach in particular that we did certainly with the bid, and I think with the daycare centers in particular, at the time that we implemented this. It's challenging because the PM rush hour, or really the rush hours in general, for where the daycare is let out, do overlap at least to a degree with the rush hours for traffic and for bus ridership, and so. It's hard to, it becomes, it's kind of a zero-sum game in that way. And again, that's why we really wanted to make sure that we have spaces available on the side streets. Additionally, like I said, any vehicle can pull over into and use the bus lane and stop in the bus lane to quickly pick up or drop off a passenger. So, you can still, you can still use the bus lanes for that purpose. particularly if, if the daycare, is run in such a way where the student can leave the daycare center, if it's a quick pickup, it's permissible.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, Dwayne, you have your hand back up. Another question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Sarah, you mentioned about the cameras, that it's legislated by government. Do you happen to know which level of government that is?
Yeah, that's a state law.
State law. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other questions from board members? I'm going over the list. Sean, do you see any?
No, you've got 3 members of the public with hands up. And just a
Okay,
note
then
to
what-
keep eye on time, we have another agenda item as well.
Yeah.
You went
Sorry,
on.
Barton, you're muted.
Simply, if any electeds or representative have a comment they'd like to make at this time, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'll move on to the questions from the public. Then it sounds like Jeffrey Thomas, go ahead.
Hello, sorry. I've got it. So I walk by this bus lane pretty frequently, and I feel like I often see delivery vehicles, especially around the BQ station right at East 18th. And it often feels like it's many of the same vehicles. So I'm wondering if you are working with the delivery companies or anything like that to try to, like, blocking the bus stops themselves. And I see buses unloading in the streets. I'm wondering if you're working with them. And also relatedly, I often see a lot of double parking at East 17th, like that wall block right there. I understand very well the point of there's not a lot of space. It's pretty cramped, but it feels like it's ineffective. It feels like it often gets practically gridlocked with if there's 2 buses trying to move to both directions. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how to improve those specific blocks.
Sure, thank you so much for that. To answer your first question, working with delivery companies, so DOT has a whole department that focuses on freight mobility, and they do coordinate directly with the industry and with specific trucking companies. I mean, ultimately, it's really challenging. If I'm a delivery driver, I'm gonna do what I need to do and risk a ticket to get my job done quickly. And I think that's the unfortunate reality. It's like when you're working on narrow streets, that's kind of how it pans out. And again, that's why we try to, as an agency, DOT, we try to create opportunities for vehicles to park legally at the curb and try to discourage double parking using both carrots and sticks. And we're going to keep trying to do that on Church Avenue and on other streets as well. For East 17th Street, that block, that's definitely a really busy block. We'll look deeper into that. I mean, it's really challenging because you have the subway station. Obviously, there's a ton of drop-off activity, Ubers, dollar cabs, people dropping off their relatives in their own cars, you name it. But thank you for that. Thank you for the intel on that, though. We'll look into the gridlock there and see if we can do anything.
Okay, so then the last question, Matthew Denise, whom I assume shares a last name with the board member. Go ahead.
Yep, that's me. Hi, thank you. Yeah, so like Jeffrey mentioned, the section from Marlborough to Flatbush still seems like quite a bottleneck, and I feel like every time I walk through there, I see several double parked cars, and kind of especially that section of the it's kind of like 17th Street to East 17th to East 19th seems especially bad pretty often. And like I understand that making larger changes here will take a while and probably needs to wait on the network redesign, but it seems like that DOT could still have a lot of leeway here to continue experimenting with the parking regulations on these blocks, and especially given the success of the 15-minute zones. It sounds like they have made it better than it was before, and I'm guessing that it's kind of the blocks at the edges of this area where they actually decrease double parking. So I feel like west of kind of that the edges of here, it's not quite as bad as it used to be. So I wonder if there's something that DOT could do. I guess there's a lot of options here that could be expand these 15-minute zones. They could be adding some commercial loading zones, because we definitely know that the commercial loading is a problem. There's a lot of pickups and drop-offs, so maybe more like general, like I don't know if that fits in the loading zones or just like the neighborhood loading zone programmer hasn't quite made it to us yet, but that would be good too. But then also what was done on the western part of the corridor with the metered parking on side streets, that seems like it would be really helpful on the eastern part too, because there's clearly a lot of demand. Well, I mean, there's clearly a lot more cars drivers who want to park and go to those businesses than there's room for, and all of those side streets, I believe, I haven't surveyed it exactly, but I know most, or if not all of them, are kind of designated for long-term car storage, and given the highly commercial nature of the area, it would be good to see a lot more metered parking, both metered parking on the side streets and kind of loading zone or 15-minute things along Church Avenue.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. You know, and I appreciate, again, I'm writing all this down and I appreciate all of this, all of your comments tonight. And yes, certainly you will, I think for, there certainly is room for improvement, both in terms of like this incremental stuff with curb regulations, as well as potentially bigger things in the longer term. And we'll see what we can do in that regard. We definitely, as soon as our team is able to get to it, we want to do it. Again, we know that Church Avenue is a really important street, and we know that the bus, and I spent enough time myself just out on this corridor for this project, riding this bus back and forth, watching traffic, walking it back and forth, different times of day, different days of the week. It's still pretty bad here, east of 16th Street for sure. And so we definitely want to do something as soon as we can. In terms of the adding more metered parking on side streets, we'll definitely look into that. My recollection from a couple of years ago is I thought that for the most part there is metered parking on the side streets. The bigger question is, how deep do we want to go onto the side streets? You know, like traditionally we have largely kept the metered parking only on the side of the corner building. But you know, there might be you know, room to expand that. That might make sense. So look into that. We appreciate it.
Okay, I let this go on a bit longer because I know there's been continued interest in this topic for quite a while. And Gaudette board member, would you care to ask a final question? Anne, you there?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Barton. So I wanted to bring up a few things. So we live very close to Church Avenue, and there are metered parking spots that are allocated as the corner wraps. And what we find, and there's also a delivery, so we're on the side of the street by Bobby's. So as they do their loading and offloading for their loading zone, which they have on the East 16th Street side, it is not uncommon to find that driveways get blocked as they try to, in anticipation, capture not just the loading zone, but above, and forces the more transient parking further down. And also there was a note about, I arrived late, so many apologies. It's very interesting, and I'm so happy I was able to attend this. But that said, there was a note in the comments on one of these slides that said, it's the one that's displayed, converting 1 hour metered parking to 15-minute unmetered for 3 spaces per block face. So I don't know if you're aware that many of the owners or people who work in the stores have to run in and out. And when you're talking about a pharmacist who has reached out to, I can tell you, everybody in our neighborhood with driveways, could she kindly please use it? There's no place for them to go. And when they're coming in from Long Island, as this person does, and other points, it really isn't that reasonable for her to take a train from where she lives. There's no parking on the other side for her to board the LIRR, go into Atlantic and back up into the MTA system and then walk 2 blocks or whatever it is. So I'm not sure that the 15-minute, I think there would be a lot of pushback from some neighbors. The hour seems to be more reasonable. But you know, as far as congestion goes, it is congested. I originally wanted to mention one thing and then get off because I know that there's other agenda items, and I don't want to run this too long. Some of the larger companies do their deliveries by advance time. So they'll give a berth for, like Walmart does this, other large chains do this at their distribution centers as well as, God bless you, other places. So I'm just curious if something like that could be explored and incentivized, because it means that on the receiving end, they have to open earlier, but it would be a better way to perhaps bridge or stagger the demand for the products to be received. And, you know, if all sides could kind of find a fit, that may actually help to lessen it. And we have so many $2 vans. So there's just so much competition for the traffic is staggering. You say you're on the bus, I believe you. So I can attest to it. So, all right, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much for these comments.
Thanks, Ann. I see one more question from a board member, and then I'm going to call it after that. So Florencia, go ahead.
Hello, yes. I just wanted to ask the question, will the parking meters be placed in front of private homes and residential buildings as well?
So as I said earlier, we have no plans to expand anything firmly at this point. If we do propose anything in the future, that would, you know, we'll come back to the community board to talk through that, and it'll be subject to the same public outreach process as anything else that we do. You know, as I think as we discussed earlier, there is certainly some demand to increase the availability of metered parking. In general, we're not particularly enthusiastic about putting it in front of residences for obvious reasons. Which is why we generally don't do that. But, you know, certainly if, you know, whatever we end up proposing, or, you know, again, it's really not even a when, but an if, but at that point, we'll come back and speak to the board and we can have a conversation about it.
Thanks. I think I'm about to move on to the third and last agenda item. I do want to make one quick point, however, that the issue of enforcement really is key to the effective implementation of the plans that you all, you know, bring from the drawing board. And I would heartily recommend much closer cooperation between DOT planning and, you know, NYPD traffic, because it can be so infuriating for both people on the bus and people in cars to see one double parker and one truck offloading entirely block Church Ave, which is something I've seen numerous occasions. So I just ask that you all take that to heart. So with that little diatribe, I'll move on to Agenda 3, which is Report on Urban Design from Neil Gagliardi, the Director of Urban Design, NYC Department of Transportation. Are you here, Neil?
Yes, I'm here. And I'm joined by Nick Pedinati, who is our Deputy Director, and Christina Yu, who's our Senior Project Manager. Thank you so much for inviting us tonight. Let me just share my screen. Let's see if I can. Hi. So I wanted to just mention, you know, that urban design is really a kind of compact group of designers within a larger group, and certainly a large agency. And although our tentacles kind of move out very widely among different units. And I always like to start off with the statistic that, you know, our real estate that we work with at DOT is 26, almost 26 or 7% of the city's land mass, which is pretty significant. So I know Kyle was earlier talking about open streets and the impact that has. So we have a great impact on the city in general and neighborhoods. And we take that very seriously. Our urban design is, as I mentioned, is part of a larger unit called Cityscape and Franchises, which really handles the the city's coordinated street furnishings like the bus shelters, as well as city bike and also revocable consents, which is a consent for private structures on public right-of-way. But our mission at Urban Design really is to align, the state-of-the-art kind of design principles with the agency and city's policies, and to really advance context of neighborhood and pedestrian-friendly and dynamic streetscapes. We're also focused on really developing area-wide plans for communities and coordinating with multiple agencies. And really, more and more so, our focus is to really foster environmental stewardship and social equity and economic viability in all the projects that we work on and the agency is involved in. We essentially at Urban Design have two main functions. One is kind of, we are the liaison for the Public Design Commission and the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And we interact very closely with our sister agencies on a number of projects. And we're basically also stewards of the Street Design Manual, which we publish periodically. And we also do get are involved in design services and project management, in-house design, and managing a lot of our larger scale capital projects. And intermittently, we do initiate programs as they arise, as needs arise. So I'll go through some of that. One of the main elements, and it's really the compendium of street design in New York City for DOT, is the Street Design Manual, and it's online. The first edition was in 2009. It's now, since 2013, mandated by city council legislation for updates, and we now have it online, as I said, since 2019. The manual, as you probably have ventured into it for a number of things, really lays out a lot of siting guidelines and parameters that really drive us internally about how to design streets, but also externally and advise designers and groups on how to arrange things on the street. And this is becoming more and more important as our streets are getting more and more complicated in how we design them. One of the challenges now that we're online is really to keep up with the ever evolving changes on the street. And one of the things that we're working closely with Kyle's group about incorporating open streets and the parameters of that in our manual. We're also very much involved, as I mentioned, with interagency and intra-agency reviews and the approvals process with the Public Design Commission and the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Some of the typical projects are our major capital projects, streetscapes and plazas, bridges, pedestrian bridges, and bridges over rivers. We also manage a lot of the private applications that come to the agency that are on DOT right-of-way. A lot of this, I know in Community Board 14 are in the past have been kind of private planted areas in front of buildings that are on the sidewalk, and those require revocable consents. We also manage projects like the furnishings, our wayfinding, distinctive sidewalks, and other kind of guidelines, and very significantly distinctive lighting. I know there's M poles on Church Avenue and Flatbush, just as there are Bishop's Crook on Newkirk Street. So we manage that and work very closely with our street lighting division, and working on the plans and securing reviews and approvals by the Public Design Commission. What we do, though, as a staff, is really focus on putting it all together. based on the kind of design principles that are laid out in the street design manual. Of course, our agency's major goal and mission is providing safety, but some of the other more design goals are to ensure balance and inclusivity in our street design, a vibrancy, which is evident in some of the programming that Kyle talked about earlier, and also our pedestrian plazas as well as streetscapes. Context is still very important, not only in historic districts, but in many of the neighborhoods throughout the city. Sustainability is key for many of the agencies, and particularly DOT in how we design our streets and manage them. And cost effectiveness and maintenance of our projects is always at the base of everything, and it really drives a lot of what we can and cannot do. I'll just walk through this a little very quickly. Just following some of the principles. I mean, Queens Boulevard is one of our great streets that is being redesigned with the foremost goal to create safety along a rather treacherous stretch of this the boulevard, and we really look to the coordination among consultants and our other colleagues about the design and how the look and feel of that for pedestrians and cyclists as well as motorists and residents. We were very much involved in the design of our select bus service stations, including some green infrastructure. This is on Nostrand Avenue along the line. Also coordinated with the MTA and how we can arrange these bus stations so that they're really hospitable for users. This is another look at the furnishings. Also, I mentioned sustainability and resiliency. I mean, we really have been working for the past decade on best practices of tree plantings and shared tree beds and bioswales, and working with our sister agencies on these efforts citywide as well. Vibrancy is really important. This is really a sea change in the past decade or so in how we use our streets and create pedestrian and public plazas, employing not only seating and vegetation, but also art in it. Neighborhood context, as I said, is key to some of the designs and what drives a lot of our units review of the projects, especially with regard to the approvals process with the Public Design Commission, the Landmarks Preservation Commission. This is at Astor Place. I mentioned cost effectiveness and maintainability. We're as good at, our streets are as good as we can maintain them over time, which is a key. And one of the things that has been significant, and Nick has been really spearheading this for quite a while, is our internal median maintenance program, which really affords us the opportunity to provide green corridors like the Grand Concourse in areas that that don't have bids, that that the city can maintain this with our own contracts and really provide the kind of complete streets that we all desire to have in our neighborhoods. This is kind of some of the details of that and the median maintenance program that affects this. As a unit, we also, as I mentioned, are involved in larger scale capital projects. One of them is in downtown Far Rockaway, which really is a major reconstruction of the streets system in the downtown, which spurred a whole rezoning and a number of affordable housing units. And I will just mention I was out there this yesterday. We're in the process of construction. It's a whole construction site, and I've never seen downtown transform right in front of our eyes. This was a parking lot, actually, one of our parking lots that was adjacent to the train station. This was existing, and this is the proposed view, but on the right side is what we did a walkthrough yesterday at the plaza area, which really is starting to realize some of the changes happening there. We really concentrate on the feel and look and organization of streetscapes. This was a streetscape, a sidewalk up on the Upper West Side on Columbus Avenue before, and a kind of after with a greening and an installation of bioswales and a green edge along the whole sidewalk, which had benches, which made it really hospitable for residents and visitors. We've also really concentrated in a number of locations around the city on streetscape design plans that are comprehensive. This one is in Jamaica, downtown Jamaica, and really that identified through a very extensive outreach process 5 or 6 focus areas for redesign and reconstruction, and we're working on that right now. One of our program initiatives for the past couple of years has been what we call Under the Elevated, and we originally partnered with the Design Trust for Public Space to look at the space adjacent to and underneath elevated transportation infrastructure citywide. I don't think CB14 has this. There's certainly infrastructure, but we're looking at it from a very comprehensive standpoint citywide, if I can, and looking at some ways of developing new standards and design components that could be inserted incrementally to improve the spaces, including lighting, which is a key element of these spaces, some green infrastructure, fencing, and some new, on the right-hand side called CityL, a transit furnishing. As I said, we're looking at this very comprehensively, looking at this kind of underestimated or undervalued asset citywide, and trying to map it and see how we can optimize this space. And in all of us, lastly, kind of engage in across the city design advocacy, and really working with colleagues and designers and other friends to really move the needle on the best practices and great design for our city streets and public infrastructure. So that's basically it. This is our senior staff at Urban Design. Nick and Christina is here with us. So that's a kind of introduction to what we do in an all-encompassing way. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. As a former chair of the Community Environment Committee, your world sort of bridges those two halves of my involvement in the community board. So I was particularly keen on it. So Sean, I believe you have your hand up, and then Florencia, is your hand up from previous question or for a new question?
Previous.
Okay, great. Then Sean, go ahead.
Thank you, Barden. And really, thank you, Neil, for that presentation. It's really interesting. And first of all, you said plaza, so that's music to my ears, and hope that you could think about Newkirk Plaza as much as I do. And then you also mentioned median maintenance, that you have median maintenance, and this is sort of an issue I've gone back and forth with DOT on, that there's some belief that Parks is maintaining the pedestrian islands in our district, and Parks is pretty adamant that they are not doing so. And then we talk about DSNY and they pull out the Leventhal agreement. And so we're really stuck. We even have people on this call right now that volunteered to go out and maintain them, but residents with weed whackers in the middle of traffic makes me worry in a few different ways. So could you talk to us about how we beg for support on that from the Department of Transportation? My other question is, would your division be part of the thought process? Another question I've had out at DOT for a long time is, as DOT expands its portfolio, adding open streets, adding restaurants and that sort of thing, I wonder a little bit how you're going to develop a rubric by which the agency or the department determines which uses, like the bus lanes and the bike lanes, or giving space over to private use like restaurants and EV charging stations and that sort of thing. These are zero-sum decisions. So how are you going to, and how are we as a community going to help inform decisions about which space gets which? Thank you.
Wow. Okay, Sean. Well, I love that you mentioned the Leventhal memo, because that's always an amusing thing. I have one in my drawer that's mimeographed in hundreds of times.
Yeah, same. Courier font typewriter. Yeah.
Which has spanned most of my career. It's in the city, and I think that really is at the genesis of the the median maintenance program, and why? Because as we were doing much more varied and green streets over the past decade, we all collectively internally acknowledge that we really have to up our game in how we do it, and we can't leave it all to parks for every living thing. And I may, Nick, I may ask you to maybe talk a little bit more about the program itself and how it's being rolled out and in different boroughs, and maybe answer Sean's question a little more directly.
Yeah, sure. Hi, this is Nick Petnati. Hope you can all hear me okay on my headphones. Yeah, so we started the landscape maintenance program at DOT really in concert with our Vision Zero Great Streets investments to take care of long corridors and really make it so there was an opportunity to even include green space in the first place. It's that constant battle of, like, if there's no one to take care of it, should we even do it in the first place? We all felt that it was really important to make sure these were truly great streets. We do have now in place 2 borough-wide contracts, one for Brooklyn and one for the Bronx. We're working on a third for Queens as we continue to roll out some capital investments there. So those contracts are in place. We have a landscape contractor that visits our sort of Vision Zero Great Street sites regularly. And we do constantly work with our borough commissioner's office to address issues that come up at various locations throughout the borough. So I think the short answer is if you can work with, I think Dash and Diana are on from our borough office, and let us know those locations specifically that have been of concern. We're happy to take a look at them. We do have a really good working relationship with our counterparts at the Parks Department, and there's sometimes overlapping jurisdiction there, and so we're happy to try to sort that out and see what makes most sense. And we are, as part of that program, also really trying to work with our legal department to see how we can help foster community stewardship of some of these green spaces in a safe manner. I think your point about volunteers with weed whackers in the middle of the traffic is really at the core of that, and something we want to take very seriously. At the same time, the spaces that are the most successful are the ones that around them really care about. So we want to try to figure out how to make that work. So yeah, in the short term, please let us know those locations more specifically. We're happy to take a closer look, and we're happy to continue to work on the long term on a solid maintenance solution there. Hope that helps.
Sean, do you have a follow-up?
It helps a lot. I'll circle back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Your second question is, I think, something we're all grappling with as our street system is really evolving. I mentioned that the agency has published a streets plan to grapple with that comprehensively. I can mention that we at Urban Design had launched called a Healthy Corridors study to try to really look at the multiple factors that contribute to the health or unhealthiness of corridors citywide, and really try to prioritize and systematize that. So I think there are a lot of studies germinating and coalescing that really are trying to grapple at that question. What are the eventual uses? And I know, open streets is relatively new, but I think it is, the one that will evolve. And I think the questions that you're asking about, like what uses, system, and citywide, it's going to have to be answered much more comprehensively. And I think there are a number of studies and activities and approaches that are really grappling at that. And I think it's also important for neighborhoods and community boards in particular to really contribute to that, that vision.
Music to my ears, Neil. And I'm happy to continue to help organize community input on them. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Sean. I see Ann Godet has her hand up. Before I call on you, though, Sean has drawn attention to me the fact that Commissioner Claudette Workman, who is DOT's Deputy Borough Commissioner for Brooklyn, has, I think, been with us for the entire meeting. And I want to say I'm really appreciative of that and extend the offer to you now if you'd care to make a comment or two.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's been a great meeting so far. So it's always a pleasure to work with Community Board 14. Everyone is just amazing, and we can continue with the meeting. All good.
Thanks so much. And Anne, you have a question, I believe?
Thank you, Borden. Yes, I do. Thank you for this very informative presentation. Speaking for myself, I can say it was well received. I'd like to just bring up some shared spaces, perhaps, and I'm curious if there's any way that you could perhaps include consideration of partnering with other agencies to address some issues which have DOT certainly involved, as well as parks and other things. So you mentioned in your presentation bioswales and so forth, which certainly help. And yes, your point about maintenance was duly noted. So I'm happy you've got some contracts on them. But going back to flooding, we have some areas in the district, particularly on Coney Island Avenue at the corner of, I guess, Caton. And that is just full of extensive ponding from when the park gets emptied. And there were conversations that we heard earlier about the possibility, so it's all sort of couched in tentatives, of using some newer concrete that offers more porosity, so that perhaps some of that could be stopped en route. But again, it's under Parks' purview. And I was just wondering if in addition to bioswales, if there are other tools in your toolbox or that could be used for sort of helping the residents and homeowners there deal with this reoccurring problem, as well as partnering, with other agencies who sort of create the problem. Thank you very much.
I may ask Nick to talk a little more specifically, Anne, but I think what I pulled up is something that we have been working on as far as a design element that actually it emanated out of the DEP bioswale standard that was developed, but Hudson Square Bid in Manhattan really kind of further developed this shared tree bed with structural soil underneath and permeable pavers. So there are things that we are pushing forward. It's actually writ large in the downtown Far Rockaway plan as well, and in the construction, and we're trying to move this as forward as a kind of new standard for situations like that. One of the things, as you mentioned, is maintenance. Right now, we're at the point where parks, certainly has stewardship over the tree beds, but not these permeable pavers and structural soil, citywide. So I think I think it's fair to say we need to all work together to kind of raise the bar of these kind of treatments in appropriate areas that might benefit communities and locations that you're talking about. I don't know, Nick, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Actually, we had a number of other committee meetings in different committees and over the years on this flooding issue. So
Yeah.
we might take you up on your offer to pursue this further when next we have a very flood-centric meeting and drag you guys in to discuss some of these technical issues.
Sure, we'd love to hear, like the problems and challenges you're confronting, the locations, and
You will
understand a bit.
you will get an earful, I can assure you. So on that, I want to thank you all from your various departments and the commissioner for joining us from the Department of Transportation. We're going to have two quick 3-minute new business items, but before you all go, DOT does in some corners of this district have a reputation for, let's say, shooting first and asking questions later. Where, for example, when you originally came to us with the Church Ave bus lane program, I personally attended one meeting where people were quite irate at the thought that basically you had already decided what was good for the neighborhood and was coming to us just to let us know what you had decided, not so much asking for our input before you made the decision. So in future, anything you all can do to kindly get the neighborhood's input before anything is cast in stone or tarmac or asphalt, it would be very much appreciated. So with that, again, I really do thank you all for your time. The presentation's been great, and thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Sure. The two last bits of quick 3-minute new business. The first is a presentation from Rona Taylor from the East Flatbush Community Development Corporation on electric dollar van initiatives. Rona, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me and making space on the agenda to hear what we wanted to share with you all this evening. So yes, my name is Rona Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the East Flatbush Community Development Corporation. Our mission is to work hand in hand with community leaders and nonprofits and funders to spark lasting social change for a fair and just Brooklyn, and we do that primarily through community development programming. I'm joined here by my colleague Theo from Perch Advisors, and we're here this evening to provide a brief introduction to a green initiative that, if supported, would intend to do 3 things: deliver community-aligned clean transportation solutions that reduce local air pollution, to help overcome persistent transportation challenges, and also to improve quality of life in communities where it's needed most. And so with that, I'll turn it over to—
Can I interrupt
Yes,
you briefly?
of course.
I'm not sure how long would you think your presentation is going to take?
5 minutes,
5
max.
minutes?
Yeah.
We settled on 3, but okay.
Okay, 3
good.
minutes.
Simply,
Yeah, definitely. It
it
could
seems to
be.
be a presentation that I think the neighborhood would enjoy having more of an opportunity to get into. And I don't know what your schedule would be, but maybe if you just gave a quick blurb on it now, and maybe we actually put you on the agenda for next month, so you can actually have the time to get feedback and fill in blanks. Which works for you? And Sean, do you have a thought?
I'll
Just
jump in.
continue. You got 2 more minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll speak as quickly as possible. It's essentially
There's like 5 slides.
I'm
Okay,
just going to
good.
scroll right through them. I'll give the high level updates. We're working with an organization called Dollar Ride, which was founded in 2018. They're really trying to start to formalize this informal mode of transportation, and they've gone through a couple of pilot programs. Right now, they are in the process. They've been named as a finalist for the Nyserda Clean Neighborhood Challenge. So that would enable Dollar Ride to put electric vehicles in parts of the outer boroughs, particularly along routes in routes along Flatbush and Utica Avenue.
So essentially, we are asking for the community board's feedback. We want to know what you think about the dollar van service. You know, obviously, I've heard it come up a couple of times in this presentation. You're all aware of dollar vans. You know, they serve a certain use to the community. There are also several challenges involved with them. And we have a survey that we'd like to share to gather feedback from the community. And we're also going to be hosting 2 community town halls to kind of get a little bit more in depth with gathering feedback about this initiative. So I'm just scrolling through these slides really quick. I have a 1-pager that I can drop in the chat, as well as a survey and event invites for the town hall meetings.
Yeah, I put the links for the town halls in the chat if you just wanted to add the link for the survey, Thea.
Yep, no problem. Here's the
And
link.
that's really it. And ultimately, we would want a letter of support from the community board. And we would welcome more time on an agenda in the future. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Great. You just totally spooked me when I saw this really fancy, well put together presentation pop up on the screen, and all of a sudden I know all my committee members are just already headed for the door. So I really appreciate your indulgence on that. And especially if you're looking for a vote of support, I would like to indeed put you on as a separate agenda item so that people have the time to ask questions and we can formulate a motion. So that's great, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Barton. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Sean.
Not a problem. My last bit of new business was a quick report on the Interborough Express. We being quite a good force from CB14, Sean, Joanne, myself, and Steve, all attended this briefing from the MTA. And I'll probably just repeat this anyway at the full board meeting, so I'm just going to give some very brief highlights. The most important one is they themselves admitted that the planning for the Interborough Express, which you probably know is going to run from Bay Ridge to Jackson Heights, they described it as quote unquote being at the 1-yard line. And one of the other attendees basically said he's not going to see it in his lifetime. And the fellows and ladies from MTA basically sort of agreed. So they're sort of obliged to start this. They're starting the environmental study. It's years off. Briefly, right now they're at the stage where they're trying to decide between 3 choices, which would be normal rail, light rail, or an express bus service to run along the freight lines, which currently cut this arc between Brooklyn and Queens. This to me was the most interesting. It has a potential for connecting 17 different subway lines. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition is still as of yet undetermined, but that's kind of intriguing. And they predict that 80,000 riders would use it every weekday. So there's going to be a public presentation from MTA on this again on May 19th. And I'm sure we'll have that posted on our site. And with that, I'll ask Steve, if you're still here, do you have anything else you'd want us to address?
I did have a question for the last presenters for Rona and
Fire away.
That's okay. What is the timetable in terms of unveiling the electric dollar van service, and do you know like what models are they, and do you know what the range is on those electric vans?
Sure. That's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of specifics right now. This proposal is going into Nyserda. We're a finalist right now, and they're going to be choosing 3 out of 6 proposals to move forward with funding. So I think that the timeline will be more clear once the funding gets awarded.
Maybe a dumb follow-up question, but are there electric car companies that have unveiled electric van models? I'm an electric car owner, but I'm not so familiar with the vans. So I just don't know the timing in terms of when those vehicles will be on the market, how much they'd cost, and what the range might be.
Sure, that's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that, but our partners at Dollar Ride, who we're kind of working on behalf of in this community outreach process, I'm sure that they know more answers, so I'd be happy to bring that back to them.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I can follow up with you, Steve, about that.
Thanks.
If there are any other questions, feel free to raise your hand now. Sean, anybody? If not, then I'll put us all out of our misery and say that the meeting is concluded at, according to my machine here, 8:22. And thank you all for having stuck it out to the very end here. And I think we gathered a lot of important information and a lot of good input from the community and the board. So thanks very much and see you next time.
Thanks, Borden.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone.